to the McMinn County Living Heritage Museum for our History for Lunch program. We've got a treat for you today. Sheriff Joe Guy, our county historian and museum board member. He's all over the map around here, and I really appreciate it. And he sure knows how to bring out a crowd, so thank you all very much for coming. So, I apologize for the delay, just a slight getting the computers, our internet's not quite as good down here, but we'll be fixing that here shortly. So, so we're going to hear a presentation today through on Starr Mountain and White Cliffs Hotel. If anybody's here heard Joe talk before, he's a fabulous speaker. Thank you very much. And but without further ado, so I won't ramble on much longer. Joe Guy.
Thank you. So if you came back in 2019 over to the Gym Theater as we began our is that the,
that's the clicker.
Wrong clicker?
You're about to turn the television off.
No. That would have been about right. If you were over there and saw this, we started off our bicentennial with this program, but I've actually modified it a little bit, so there's a few new slides and stuff on here. So I want to talk about the mountain, the hotel, and then some of the people that lived up there on Starr Mountain. I've got it upside down. So again, Starr Mountain is our eastern border of our county. It lies immediately east of Etowah. It's about a 20-mile mountain range, a 20-mile long mountain range running roughly from the northeast to the southwest. It rises to an elevation of almost 2,300 feet. And there's numerous other parts of the mountain. It's not your traditional mountain with a peak on the top. It is literally a big plateau. And actually on the top of it, they call it the Flats. It's always been known for that. And it was farmed back then because people, if you could just get to the top of the mountain, there's a lot of fairly level land up there. And if you've ever been up there, you know that's true. There's also additional peaks that make up Starr Mountain, Black Mountain being the most notable. It's on the upper probably quarter of the mountain. I was actually up there Saturday, but it's probably our biggest topographical feature with quite a bit of history. Again, it's plateau shaped. I talked about the flats already. On the northeast side, and there are bluffs all over the mountain, but the most prominent that you can see from the valleys below is actually on the north, or on the Monroe County side, and as you're coming out of Tellico Plains today on Mecca Pike, or if you're down in the Rural Bell community, you can see White Cliff up there. It's pretty prominent that sticks out of the mountain, and that's where the hotel's going to get its name from. And you probably guessed that. Of course, that's just a picture of it. Actually, this is. Does anybody know where that picture is taken from? Best view in the county, at our landfill. that is at the McMinn County landfill. It has one of the best views in the county. So I'll be honest, I kind of like going out there down here. But you can literally see the whole 20-mile length of the mountain. So there are a lot of hiking trails up there. There's a couple on the sort of the Etowah and Englewood, kind of the northern end of it. Most of them are on the southern end of the mountain. But there's some things that we've done over the past, probably now getting close to 20 years, taking people up there. And I used to do hikes up there and walk people around the hotel site and then walk them out to Panther Cave. And now I just take people to Panther Cave because the hotel site was in the Byrne family for many, many years, but they have since sold that to a gentleman that lives over in Rural Vale, and he owns an internet company, and it's his tower is up there now, and he's had a lot of vandalism, and so I really don't take that many people over on that private property anymore. But I will occasionally walk people out to the cave site that we'll talk about. But Bullet Creek Falls is another popular place up there that people visit. It's better access from the Rural Vale side. Actually, the road is actually better. That's the way I came up Thursday. I came up from the Mecca Pike side last week when I did a tour up there, and it's the Forest Service needs to do some work on that road up there if you've been up there. But it's a really beautiful area. That's just, again, some of the hiking trails. The Panther Cave Trail and the Bluff Trail are not developed trails. We just know how to use the Forest Service road to get back in there off the top of the mountain. But many of those others are actually developed, mapped, and are actually bona fide Cherokee National Forest trails, hiking trails. And one of them actually goes through the old the Burkett Ivins place. The old Burkett Ivins Trace. Yeah, it's a horse trail. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit too. Keep hitting the wrong button. So how did it get its name? So Caleb Starr came into our area. He was born in the 1758. He comes into Cherokee country a little before the Revolutionary War in 1775. And he gets a job with Ellis Harlan. And Ellis was a very old, by that time, trader who had been under contract with the British government, and he was actually involved in the whole Fort Loudon story. He was one of the better traders that spent time among the Cherokees that they trusted. A lot of them were not so ethical. I know once some Cherokees snatched up a yardstick that they were using to measure deer hide with and compared it to another trader's yardstick, and it was about that much shorter. So a lot of things like that went on, taking advantage of them. But he was not that way. Ellis always seemed to have a pretty good reputation. He winds up marrying Nancy Ward's daughter, Katie. And then they have a daughter, I can't remember her name. Nanny. I always get Katie and Nanny mixed up. So they have a daughter named Nanny who winds up marrying Caleb Starr. So in 1817, there was a treaty held down, it literally says in the treaty it's held in Calhoun. It was either on our side of the river or in the Charleston side. Neither one of those communities really existed then. Calhoun was just sort of a ferry site being operated by Major John Walker. We think it was in Calhoun, but we're not entirely sure because both sides of the river were literally referred to as Calhoun back then. So anyway, they had this treaty. Andrew Jackson was there. Joseph McMinn was there. Colonel Montgomery, I don't remember what his first name is. They met with what Cherokee leaders that they could talk into coming, and they offered them two options: that they could go ahead and on their own remove themselves and their families and go out west and take advantage of the free land that they were going to give them out in Oklahoma. I will throw this in there. Nobody checked with the Osage Indians that were living on that land. The federal government was just going to give it away. And so they said, hey, you can go out there and live, and they would give you a blanket and a gun and a kettle and a few little doodads to move your family out there. Or, under the terms of the 1817 treaty, if you wanted to stay in McMinn County, or, well, actually, McMinn County didn't exist then, in this area, they would give you a reservation of land. And a reservation consisted of 640 acres, which is 1 square mile. And you could take possession of that as a Cherokee, and the government would give you that. It would be yours and to your heirs and so on and so forth from then on. So there were some Cherokees that took advantage of the opportunity to go ahead and go out west, but many took the opportunity to take that free land. Nancy Ward's family, the McIntoshes took a reservation just north of where we're standing right now, right up here on the north end of Athens, up around where the old Clegg Mansion is, where the Scream Chamber is today, going toward Nyota. They took one up there. Major Walker took a reservation down in what would become Calhoun, and that's when he began to lay the streets out and everything to make that community up down there. Nanny, because she was a quarter-blood Cherokee, she qualified for that allotment, and so again, Caleb winds up being married to someone who gets 640 acres, and she takes her allotment over in the Chestatoo Valley at the foot of Starr Mountain. And then they'll wind up buying additional land and getting close to having about 1,000 acres. So they built a house behind the old greenhouse here that's set back here in that grove of trees. And you can just barely see where Caleb's house was today. There's a little indention in the ground where the root cellar was. But the house is long gone. But that's where his home was on Ken Road 879 and 875, where they intersect right there at the foot of the mountain. And then there's a pretty good spring right down here. This is all Castile property today. Actually, you can kind of see one of the spring houses right there. And there used to be a prehistoric Native American mound right in there that was eventually just plowed down as they I don't know if it's by Caleb or whoever, but they plowed that kind of down and leveled it. But there's actually some documentation of some of the things that took out of that. Not a very big mound, but a small one. So he lives there about almost 15 years. And in a little before 1830, some more opportunities to go out west come about for many of the Cherokees. And the Starrs actually voluntarily packed up and sold their property here and moved out to Oklahoma, and that's where Caleb and his wife and most of his immediate family passed away. Sometimes people ask me about Belle Starr. She was not a Starr descendant. She married one of his sons, very briefly, I might add, among many other men that she was involved in. And that's kind of how she inherited the Starr name. So White Cliff Springs. Actually, I thought I was. Let's see. No, I'm right. So White Cliff Springs was the hotel. I think that's what most of us are here to talk about. Up on top of the mountain, not on top of White Cliff, but a little bit down the mountain, a little bit up north of the mountain. Within walking distance of the White Cliff is a sort of a shelf, and I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. If you've ever been up there, it's just sort of a shelf that kind of comes back in like a little tiny valley that kind of intrudes up on the top of the mountain with ridges all around it. But it was just big enough to build some buildings in. And how you got up there is kind of where this slide comes from. So there were very few roads in the early and mid 1800s to get up there, except for just trails. But the property where the hotel winds up being built was purchased by Joseph Peck and some other entrepreneurs. And we think that there was probably already a 2 or 3 story building up there, maybe like what we would think of as a boarding house up on top of the mountain. And he purchases that, probably enlarged it a little bit. We imagine it was just a one-sided 2-story, what would look like a big home today, that faced out over the valley there, looking east over the Rural Vale Valley, over Monroe County. But this is how you got up there. You had to take a train, because people came from all over, specifically the southeast, to places like this, to get away from what they thought was sickness. As you probably know, back in the early 19th century, yellow fever, scarlet fever, diseases like that were very prevalent, specifically in bigger cities. And I think today we understand it's just because people were packed in so close together, and there was no real sewer system, there was no real medical system. So when people when they would leave the cities, specifically in the summer or the warmer months, and they would travel inward, especially up into the mountains, they felt better and nobody got sick. And they thought it was something magical, literally, about the mountains, specifically about the water they were drinking. Because remember, you weren't carrying a Diet Mountain Dew with you on your trip. You were drinking water wherever you were living. And so there's springs all over the top of Starr Mountain, 2,300 feet up, and I mean very well flowing springs. And I wish I knew more about what kind of aquifer must be underneath that mountain. But there is one right there at the hotel site. And we'll see some more about it in just a minute. But they thought that water, because they were drinking that water in that mountain air, and nobody was getting sick, And so people begin to think, well, this is a cure for this yellow fever and typhoid. But all they were really doing was quarantining themselves by default. They were just getting away from sick people and going somewhere where those diseases weren't that prevalent. And everybody was, thought it was magical. But to get out there, you had to take a train in the early years to Athens or Niota, which was Mouse Creek at the time. Then you would have to take a wagon over through eastern McMinn County and through what would eventually be Etowah and Inglewood. And you would get over to the foot of the mountain, and you would find little buildings like this, and that building still stands. We think, we don't know for sure, but based on some old folks who talked to us years ago, that was what was called a hack station. And you would get off there at the hack station on your larger wagon and get in a much lighter wagon that had 2 or 3 rows of seats in it, and another wagon would follow you, a little cart, and you would inch up that little narrow, and to call it a road would be something. And some of the stories about it said it was so narrow that you would just ease. It's about 3 miles from the foot of the mountain up to the hotel. And if another wagon was coming down, and some of them even had bells and things, so you could know that when people were approaching you, you had to get out of your hack, crawl up the side of the hill away from the road, so they could set the wagon over or flip it over and let the other horse and wagon come by as people were coming up and down the road. So it was barely wide enough to do that. Now some of those roads still exist. When you're going up the mountain, you actually go through a pretty sharp switchback coming off of Mecca Pike. And that's what you see right here, and you go through an orange gate. And that's actually the county line. That's where you go back into McMinn County. But if you turn looking this way and look this way, you're going to see this. And if you walk over that little hump right there, you can see the old hack road going winding on down the mountain. And actually, as you go on, this is the original road. That follows the old hack road about half a mile, and then the old hack road kind of goes up above the present road, and you can still see it up there, just barely wide enough to get a wagon on. So that's how you got up there. Ooh, did it again. So it's built around 1850 by Peck and his fellow businessmen. They operate what they call White Cliff Springs for about 19 years. And in 1869, the hotel burns. And that was the 2-story building. So it burns mysteriously one night. It has been rumored that, and it's probably true, that they thought Mason Evans had burned it, and we'll talk about Mason the Hermit in just a few minutes. So they kind of tried to pin it on him briefly, but they wound up determining a little girl evidently came forward, or a young girl, and said, I was in my room and I knocked a candle over and it caught some curtains on fire, and that's what caused the fire. So they didn't blame Mason, they realized it was a little girl. So for the next 2 years, the property previously had been bought by Mr. McGill, who built many, J.H. or J. Harvey McGill, who had come into the area. He had a hotel in Niota already. He would wind up building a hotel or two in Athens. And so that's what he did for a living. He sees an opportunity here. I guess the Pecks kind of wanted out of it. He buys it, and he rebuilds White Cliff Springs into what most of us remember, or not remember, but know of, and the photographs that we see, which is the top photograph right there. About 115 rooms, 3 stories. The bottom floor, about half of it was a banquet hall. It also had a bowling alley. And one of the bowling balls had actually been recovered years ago off the side of the mountain. It's a wooden bowling ball that's in y'all's family, I think. Yeah. And I'll tell you why it was off the side of the mountain in a moment. But he built the hotel. He built this spring house that surrounds the old spring, because again, people thought that water was medicinal. If I could pronounce all the chemicals that's in the water, I would, but they're actually known for a certain 2 or 3 types of elements and minerals that are in that water. I will throw this at you. A lot of people would build these places around springs, and to make the water look like it had minerals in it, they would leave rusty nails in the spring to turn the water rusty, because back then people thought that was a good thing. That drinking rusty colored water out of a spring was good for you. They didn't have to do that here. It naturally occurs that way. You go up there today and look at it, and it still looks just like it did back then. But they had the bowling alley, and they had a grand piano in the ballroom. They had a barber shop. It was literally about as modern, maybe even more modern, than just about any other place in our county. It was such a big deal. They actually ran a telephone line all the way from Athens across the county and up the mountain to the hotel at one time. And it was one of, if not one of the first, if it was not the first, it was one of the first long distance telephone lines just for the hotel. Nobody else was attached to it once they got telephone service up there. But I tell people too, they would bottle that water and sell it just like they do today. They would bottle that water up there out of those springs, and you could also bathe in it. And I always say, I hope that they bottled it before they bathed it. But back then, who knows? So this is what it looks like today as you're coming up the mountain. This tree's actually fallen over now, but the hotel sit in this shelf right here. You can see the edge of the mountain. You're looking off right here over toward Rural Vale and Monroe County, and the road kind of snakes around, and everything over to your left is where the hotel was. It remained in McGill's possession until the 1890s. He falls down the grand staircase up there as an older gentleman and winds up passing away. It's later bought. I don't remember who owned it. Maybe Everhart. Everhart family owned it between McGill. Does that sound right, Paul? Mm-hmm. And the Burns. The Burns buy it. And this is a funny little thing. So I was going to put this on the slide, but I just don't have time to today. When you look at an old map of Monroe County shows Whitecliff being in Monroe County. And it was until Harry Byrne buys it. And what we think happened was he actually moved McMinn County's line, because when you look at a map of McMinn County today, down on that lower corner is a nice little cute little square. And coincidentally, takes in this property. And so you're actually in McMinn County when you're in this property. We think because he was from here and represented this county, they just did that so they'd have it in our county. But they held on to it for a long time, and then it falls into disrepair in the 1930s. 1934, it was just too much to keep up with, and they began to sell some of the lumber out of it. Allegedly, there's a lot of homes on that side of the county that are built out of some of the wood that came out of the hotel. I know there's a banister in a store in Nyota that came out of the hotel. A lot of furniture remains. I think there's a sofa that we have here.
Yeah, upstairs in the gallery too.
Yes, I thought that was a nice touch that you all put that on display when I'm going to talk about it. I have a table that was given to me, a little side table out of one of the rooms. So those things are still kind of floating around out there. But they wound up tearing it down. And the reason that there are so many things you don't find as many artifacts, and I'm not trying to tell anybody to go up there looking, because it is private property. But when you could go up there, you didn't find a whole lot of stuff. You could find some stones and some old pipes, every now and then a piece of broken glass. But if you drop off the side of the mountain, you find all kinds of stuff. And that's where I think the bowling ball was found. And what they did was literally just take some bulldozers up there and push the remaining parts of the hotel off the side of the mountain. So anything that was inside the hotel fell off the side of the mountain. And that's why down on those lower bluffs down there below the site, you can actually still find some things. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of it. So this is looking, I'm going to show you a present day photograph from this same view. This is looking back on this side of this, it was a T-shaped hotel. All of this literally overlooks the edge of the valley. It's built right on the edge of the mountain, so it looks east, toward Tellico Plains and Rural Bell and the mountains over on the North Carolina line. So this is what it looks like today. I'm standing about where that photograph was taken. And so you can see there's the edge of the mountain. You can see the distant ranges out there. And the hotel kind of set in this area right here. But of course, it's all grown up now. This is the spring house site. I took that other picture standing in the roadway right up here. And you can't probably see it in this photograph, but you can actually see the foundation right there of this old spring house. But I'm standing pretty close to about where that photograph was taken. And the spring still flows today. There's still water coming out there. That old chalky, rusty-looking water that they thought had healing properties back then. But just a really remarkable place. A lot of stories revolve around the Fisher family from Athens and the marrying into the Gosh family. And wound up having a lot to do with our local history here. There were some deaths that occurred because people would hike out from the hotel out to White Cliff, and I mean I used to go up there and hang out with my buddies too. A lot of us did. But they would walk out there, and then people would get intoxicated or be showing off for the girlfriend and fall off the cliffs and die. So one particular story that was told to me that had to do with the Evans Funeral Home in Athens. A young man from Minnesota, I think I'm telling this right, meets his fiancee there at the hotel, and they're having a good old time, and they take a little romantic stroll out to the cliffs, and he's doing like a young man will do and kind of get too close to the edge, and sure enough, he slips and falls several hundred feet down and to his death. So everything's wagons, horse and wagons back then. They didn't send an ambulance or a hearse up there to get him. They had to call Athens, get Mr. Evans to take his horse and wagon over here, get up all the way up the mountain. He brought his embalming materials with him because the body had already probably a day or two had gone by. And so he embalms him there at the hotel, puts him in a coffin that he brought, and hauls him back down the mountain, back over to Athens. And this young man had bought a two-way ticket. He intended on coming down from Minnesota, visiting his sweetheart, and going back home. So the story goes that Mr. Evans came to the depot here up on Depot Hill and explained what had happened. I've got this young man here. We just need to ship his body back to Minnesota. He's already paid his fare, and we just put him on the train. And of course, the clerk said, "No, this guy's dead. I'm not going to." He can't. That ticket is for the passenger car. This is going to have to go in the freight car. You're going to have to pay freight to ship his body back to Minnesota. And so there was quite an exchange there. So the story goes that Mr. Evans said, "Fine, I'll take him out of the coffin and put him in a seat, and then you can accept the ticket." And supposedly the clerk grabbed the ticket, stamped it before Mr. Evans could make good on that, and put the coffin in the baggage car and took care of everything. A lot of neat little stories that surrounded the hotel. I know on one of my tours I did early in the mid-2000s, Emmett Adams was there. And some of you may remember Emmett from being down in Polk County. He used to play a lot of bluegrass music. He was pretty old back then. And he had gone on one of those walks, and we came back to the hotel site, and he started talking. And he had actually lived up there as a child back in the 30s. His parents were caretakers of the hotel right before it was torn down. And so he has some great memories of it. And to be on the site, literally with somebody that could remember and lived up there, was just a great opportunity. But what struck me, I think he said they had 8 or 9 brothers and sisters. And they would walk that mountain road every day, 3 miles, to get back down to Mecca Pike to get on a school bus and go to school and be brought back there every evening and walk all the way back up that mountain every day. And he was talking acting like it wasn't anything. It's hard enough to drive, but let's go on. So let's talk about Mason. Mason Evans, probably one of the more legendary folks that had anything to do with the mountain. There's a lot of legend around him. Everybody seems to have a Mason Evans story. Everybody's got an ancestor that gave him clothing or food, which it's entirely possible that they did. He's born in 1824 to Robert and Karen Evans, who lived around the Mount Vernon community between here and Tellico Plains. He had several brothers and sisters. So let me add this. So what I trust as a historian is this book. I trust it more than anything. And let me just go ahead and brag on the museum. The only known copy, am I correct?
I think so. I'd have to verify.
It's the only one I know of.
Okay.
The only known copy that exists is here. And they've been kind enough to scan this thing and provide me with it to actually read. But to jump forward a little bit in Mason's story, when he is an older man, some people got concerned about him, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And they arrest him and bring him to Athens and take his picture on the courthouse steps. It's this picture right here that we know and where the sketchings and things come from. And W.F. McCarran was the editor of the Athens Post, I think, the Post. And he is so intrigued with Mason and his story, he actually writes this book about him, Wild Man of the Chilhowie. And he does a pretty good job going and interviewing Mason's family and his brothers, his brother-in-law, people in the community, and writes a pretty good, fairly well-documented story. I tend to trust that because it was written during Mason's lifetime, and he talked to people who actually knew Mason. And so, according to that book, Mason, his family always thought that he was a little odd. And he would probably, in today's world, he would be probably diagnosed with either schizophrenia or a manic depressive type person. Of course, back then there was no treatment for things like that. So up and through most of his early life, he was fairly what we would consider a normal guy. He got some kind of an education. He taught a little school. He was supposedly very good with numbers and could work and keep books for some of the little country stores. But after the Civil War, according to that book, he goes down to Mississippi to see one of his brothers and catches yellow fever. And it almost kills him. But when he comes back, his family said he was never the same. And he began to really manifest a lot of what we would call some psychological issues. He would get into these fits of depression and just leave home. There may have been some sort of lady who he was infatuated with, but not to the point that we read about in Torment Madame's. And which I'm not taking anything away from that book. It's a great book. But a lot of that's made up. It's made up purely to tell a good story. It's based on a lot of historical fact. But Mr. McKinney, again, I use that book. A lot of what my information I'm giving you is things we've learned in that book. But when you compare that to some of these older things and census records, court records, you kind of get a little bit different story. But we think that according to the first book, again written during Mason's lifetime, that about 1870, in the mid, maybe 1880 is when he really began to kind of go off the deep end and really go out and not take care of himself, dress like he dresses right here in this photograph. And most people that testified about him in court describe him as just, people would give him clothes, he'd wear the same clothes until they literally fell off his body. And then sometimes he would just wrap rags around his arms and legs. He wore whatever old slouch hat he could find. His beard was all grown out and matted. When you encountered him, when he was in one of these states, they claimed that he would just kind of talk in grunts and barely perceptible whispers. But according to his family, sometimes he would get better. And so he would kind of go through these cycles up and down with his psychosis, and he'd get better. And one of his brother-in-laws, Horner Calthorpe, actually built Mason a little home back behind the Calthorpe farm, just inside Monroe County, and Mason would stay there. And he would stay at some other places. He's in the census records living with a family. And it's been passed down that he actually went back to work periodically. He would work and clerk at a store. And so there were some things he could do periodically when he was feeling good, but unfortunately he would recycle down into these fits and one day just wander off and be gone. And he would he didn't stay on the mountain all the time. He would wander down around between Starr Mountain and Inglewood, and the Liberty Hill and Barter Branch and Mount Vernon communities over in Rural Vale, and just kind of wander around, kind of like a homeless person. And people would know that he was out, he'd be seen. He never caused any trouble. So people, when they were, people would bake and cook at home a lot more then. And so their stories go that if you made a pie, you better make two. Because if you set them out to cool, Mason's going to get one of them. If you knew that he was in the neighborhood. And people would leave clothing out for him. And sometimes people would literally just prepare a basket of food and just set it out. And if he wandered by, they'd just feed him. And he also, a couple of funny things kind of come about him. Supposedly, periodically, he would pick him up a pet. And for a while, he carried a rooster around with him up under his arm. And he carried it so much that he wore the feathers off of it. And so I tell kids, when I tell the story, he carried a naked rooster around with him. And then one day, the rooster's gone. So, one would imagine that Mason, in desperation, started looking at the rooster less of a pet and more of a meal. And probably ate the rooster. And then he gets him a cat. And he carries his cat around with him for a while. And then the cat turns up missing. So, I don't know what slow roasted cat tastes like, but more than likely he probably made a meal out of the cat too. Make sure I covered most of that. So, one of the places that he would stay on the mountain is Panther Cave, and it's coming up here on one of these slides. But he would visit the hotel, and they would feed him at the hotel. He was a known person up on the mountain among all the other people that lived on the mountain. There was a Bowers family that lived up there and farmed up there. People ask me sometimes, well, how did they get food to feed sometimes hundreds of guests that were staying up there in those 115 rooms? Well, you couldn't haul food up there. I mean, I'm sure they hauled some, but it was because of the farmers that owned all of that land in the flats. And they could just about purchase all of the food from just the farmers up there on the mountain, between, meat, vegetables, anything, to mostly take care of people. And so there was plenty of food to eat up there for all the guests, but obviously there was a lot of it, because a lot of it got thrown away and given to Mason, which kind of tells us there was obviously most days seemed like they had plenty of food up there, and so it was a good place to go. If they're giving it to Mason, they certainly had an excess of it. That's just another sketch that comes off of that photograph, and these are some census records. In 1850, he's living with his parents in Monroe County. In 1860, he is living at his own home in Monroe County, so it doesn't seem like he's gone crazy yet. The 1870 census, there was a fire. So if you do genealogy, you know this to be true. It's a little bit difficult census to find information on, but by 1880, he is a boarder living with the Benedict Ellis family in Monroe County, and he's literally listed as insane. So just based on that, it sounds like he was later in his life when he started to really become debilitated with some of his mental health. And I've already told you about the Mississippi trip where he caught his fever. We don't know for sure what happened to Mason. When he was arrested in 1886, 88, when the picture was taken, he is taken to the county poor farm, which at the time was out, well, honestly, we had two of them. One of them was out in the South Liberty community today, and another poor farm. If you drive by the McMinn County Airport on the little airport road that goes between the airport and our new highway department, you will see some stone buildings out there in those fields, and that was part of the second poor farm. If you were poor, if you were indigent, if you were mentally ill, that's where the county would send you. And you could go out there, and there was a place to, not much of a place, but a place to keep the elements off your head. You could farm if you wanted to, and eke out a living out there. And so they would take people like Mason and supposedly chain him up out there in one of those buildings, and he escapes. So a couple of days later, one of his neighbors testifies in court about how bad off he was and that something needed to be done about him. And so the judge said, fine, I'm going to deputize you, and you're going to go catch Mason. And so the guy goes up on the mountain. Obviously, he knew where he was. Within a day or two, brings Mason back. He is evaluated by one of our local doctors. Some other people testify about his mental state. The court declares him insane and sentences him again to the county poor farm. So there's two different stories about his demise. We know he died about 1892. One story is that he died at the poor farm, and his body was taken back up to the cemetery in Monroe County where his parents are buried at the Hickory Grove. But there is a story that he escaped again, wound up hiding out on the mountain again, and they found him up there frozen to death in the other version. And I'll be honest, I really don't know which one is true. There's a little evidence both ways, but that's what winds up happening to him. But Panther Cave, and I'll give you an example of a storytelling technique that Mr. McKinney uses in Torment the Knobs. When you read that book, he writes how Mason sits in Panther Cave and sees the hotel burning. That's impossible because they're on opposite sides of the mountain, below the peak of the mountain, a couple of miles away. And so there's no way when Mason, when you sit in this at his rock shelter, you're looking on the Etowah side. The hotel faced the Tellico side. And so again, this one of those little things he used to make it more romantic and keep the story going. So Panther Cave, if you go on past the hotel site and you kind of come up on the top of the mountain, the road will split. The left fork will go on down through Bullet Creek, I think Yellow Creek, that comes out down back again in the Rollvale community. And if you take a right, that's the old Starr Mountain Road. They used to go all the way across, but now it dead ends out at our telecommunications tower out there. But on that road, on the fire, going toward the tower, the fire tower, is where you can find the pull-off, and it's a gated pull-off. And luckily, there's a little Forestry Service road that winds back off of the main road, past the gate, and then around this ridge back here. It passes a couple of food plots, but you wind up right on top of Starr Mountain. Right, if you could look down through the trees, you would see Highway 39 coming into Mecca Pike, right above the old Stevensville community, or Stevensville Church that's down there. So you walk out there, and you drop off the edge of the mountain, and down below you can see the top of this bluff. And this is looking out, Inglewood's over here, Athens is way out here on the horizon. You can't see Etowah because you're kind of around the corner of the mountain. On a really, really clear day, you can see all the way to the cover of the mountains. So I'll give Mason this. He had a good eye for a good view if he's going to go camp somewhere. But you walk down a very steep little decline to get to the top of that bluff. And when you get down there, when you walk around the front of it, it's not like a classical cliff face. It's just a bunch of jumbled rock, some of which are as big as a house. And they're all just kind of sitting there. But if you get down, you can kind of follow the spaces in the rocks, and you get back between this big, huge rock on the right and the main cliff face to your left, and there's a rock shelter back there. And that is, there's a couple of places that were pointed out to me by older people that I would think would know where Mason actually resided or would, even for a short period of time. And honestly, when you get down in there and climb up in there, you actually climb up into a room. And there is a flat area that is big enough for actually a couple of people to lay down and sleep. And so it's a pretty roomy little area there. Now, this is just Joe Guy talking. When you're down in this right here, and it's hot, I kid you not, it feels like there's an air conditioner blowing on you. It's the most amazing thing, that cool, probably 58-degree air coming out of those rock shelters and out of all the nooks and crannies and crevices in that bluff. It's just kind of floating out towards you. So this would be a really good place to stay in the summertime. Not so much in the wintertime. So, if you walk all the way around the front of the bluff, you find this, between this big rock here and this one over here. That's about 8 feet off the ground. And again, you can climb up there, climb back in there, and there's a big room. I know for a fact Boy Scouts have camped years ago in that cave. And you can build a fire back in there. And it's not, I shouldn't say cave, it's a rock shelter. It doesn't go very far back in the bluff. But you can build a fire back in there. And there is a natural chimney that the smoke will go out and through the top of the bluff. And we were talking about that last week when I was up there. If you know Perry Philpott, I was up there with him and a school group, and Perry just took it upon himself to, I was going to see if that chimney's there. And he literally crawled in that and crawled up through that opening. And Perry's a pretty good sized guy. Yeah. But he actually crawled all the way to the top of the bluff through that natural chimney. So this would be a good place to stay during colder weather because you'll get more sunlight. You got a little bit more visibility out of the, you're kind of looking off the side of the mountain right there. So it's my guess that when we talk about Panther Cave, we're really not talking about one place. We're literally talking about a bluff with a bunch of little holes in it. And I mean, if it were me, I'd pick any of those places to stay, depending on the weather. And so I personally think, I feel very confident because of some of the elderly people I talked to, some of the pictures I've seen, that both of those places and that bluff is Panther Cave. And any of those little holes in that place where you can kind of crawl in, it's flat on the inside, you can almost stand up a couple of places inside, it's probably where Mason would go up and stay. And so it's kind of neat to be up there in that area where he resided. Very beautiful, very quiet, great view. Again, looking out over the mountain. When I was up there, I went up there a week ago Tuesday to check the trail and make sure I could get those school kids down there. And I didn't want to come home. It was really nice up there, away from everything. And you can kind of see why he chose that to kind of be one of his places to go. So this is an excerpt from Wild Man of Chilhowie, McCarran's book that was written during his lifetime. And he describes it as this. The cave in late years has been a favorite retreat of Mason Evans, being frequented less than any other locality of the mountains on account of the labor and difficulty of reaching it. There's a little mortar-shaped cavity in a rock near the mouth of the cave in which Mason beats his corn using a rock for a pestle. His bed is here, as elsewhere in the woods, always consists of a huge pile of leaves in winter under which he buries himself like a badger, sleeps most of the day, and prowling at night. At the mouth of this cave are seen feathers and the debris of such quaint food as he has in store. He is a very hearty eater, and when furnished food by the neighbors, frequently drinks 2 quarts of strong coffee at one meal and eats voraciously anything set before him. This is kind of funny. It says, during a severe cold spell some years ago, Mr. James C. Irvin, who is an ancestor of mine, who lives near the base of the mountain, took pity on him, induced him to accept the hospitalities of his house and fire. Mason came down from his mountain cave and listlessly sat before Irvin's fire until the family retired. In the morning, Irvin found his visitor had not only disappeared, but also a fine turkey gobbler and several other fowls. So Mason made off with Mr. Irvin's, one of my distant uncles, turkey and probably a few chickens, got took back up on the mountain. So Buster Dugan. Buster is probably one of our more noted outlaws, and Starr Mountain at different times has been known as a place that is a good place to get away from the law. And so Buster was one of those folks. He actually came from a fairly prominent family. His father had been an officer in the Civil War. He had a couple of brothers. One would wind up being elected sheriff twice here in McMinn County. One would be shot on the streets of Inglewood back in the early 1900s. But Buster, or I think WW was actually his initials, William W. Dugan. He was really just a bad character from day one. He's just kind of a rough and tumble guy. He winds up getting married to a girl down in Alabama, gets mad at his father-in-law, and does what we do. He kills him. Killed his father-in-law in cold blood. Somehow got out of that, comes back up to McMinn County, and he was a little unstable. He would do things like the Dugan property was just off of Mecca Pike on the mountainside if you're driving toward Tellico Plains. His house was long gone, but I think some of the air's still on it. And he just get his rifle, and on Sundays, as people were walking and driving their wagons over to Stevensville Church, he just shoot at people while they were going to church. He was just that cold-blooded kind of guy. Even his friends lived in fear of him. He was playing cards one day over on Mecca Pike, and one of his buddies just kind of got tired of playing. There wasn't anything going on necessarily, but whatever he did or said made Buster mad. So as his friend is literally walking away, he shoots him in the back and kills him. And he would do this. When he would get out and he wanted to get in somebody's head and threaten them, he was a bit of a bully. He would make sure that the man of the house was off in the fields or had gone to town, and he knew he'd be gone a while. And Buster would just force his way in the home with the wife and mother there. And remember, these are not big spacious homes back then. These are 1 or 2 room cabins and houses. So she didn't really have anywhere else to go. And he would force her to cook for him, and he'd go and lay in that man's bed. And just take over the house and just rest, just recline in this man's bed while this other man's wife was cooking him something to eat. Now their children are there, she's there. Buster would get up and eat and leave, be on his merry way before the husband came home. He did that a lot. And people were terrified of that guy. But he winds up, actually tried to kill the Monroe County Sheriff. Some arrest warrants got issued for him over a murder. He hides out. Then the sheriff runs up on him in Mount Vernon, and Buster tries to pull a gun, and the sheriff's able to wrestle away from him, and they take him into custody and try him in Madisonville. While the trial is going on, he's bonded out, and he tries to fake his own death. He digs up a body and wraps his coat around it and burns it on the side of the road, hoping that people will think that he has been killed. But the body wasn't burned bad enough, and they were able to tell it wasn't Buster. And so they rearrest him and try him. But I think the trial actually turned into a mistrial. But where he messed up, as my dad always said, there's always somebody meaner than the meanest guy you know. So down in the lower end of Starr Mountain, down into Polk County, was the Boring. Have I got that up there? It is. If I'd read my stuff, I'd remember that. So the Boring family, and they controlled the moonshining operation and numerous other things on that end of the mountain. And Buster goes down and threatens young Boring, one of the son's wives, and gets into an altercation with young Boring and kills him. Well, Mr. Boring was not, he was a whole lot meaner than Buster and had a lot more resources. So he starts bringing in what amounts to mercenaries and hunting, to hunt Buster down and kill him. So now he is literally on the run by people a whole lot worse than the sheriff. And he's up wandering the mountains, just trying to stay going. They say he was so paranoid that he would sit around the campfire at night and literally pull the hair of his beard out. And he had these big bald patches in his beard. And men, that would be very painful, wouldn't it? But that's how bad off he was. So eventually he seems to have thought that it was safe to kind of slip back down the mountain, slip back to his house. He goes to see his wife. He spends the night. He goes out. Remember, people didn't have bathrooms back then. You can shave on the porch. And so he takes his shaving bowl and his water out there, and he's shaving on his porch, and a gunshot rings out. And he falls dead. And so they wanted him dead so bad that when the sheriff winds up coming up there, who I think was Burkett Ivins, because now he's in Mid County. When Sheriff Ivins came up there to investigate, they went out to Buster's corn crib, and somebody had been laying out there that they guessed for days, based on some cigarette papers and some other things that were out there. Somebody had, they weren't leaving that corn crib until Buster showed up, and they were able to shoot him as he was standing on his porch and kill him. Sheriff Ivins was known for a lot of things. We'll talk about him in just a minute. But he also knew when to not push his luck either. So they actually had some tracks that they followed up the mountain. And the story goes that Sheriff Ivins got to the top of the mountain and said, "That's far enough. I'm not tracking the Borings," and crossing up with him. And so Buster's killer was never found. So a couple of days, this is 1914, a couple of days after he's been killed, they've had a funeral, they buried him there at Conestoga Cemetery. You'll see his grave today. There is a gentleman walking down the road early one morning, a few days later, and he sees smoke coming out of the cemetery. So he walks up there to investigate. And this just shows you how much people hated Buster. Somebody had dug down into his grave, down to the coffin, not disturb the body, but piled wood on top of it and set it on fire. And so that's how bad this guy was hated in the community. Maybe one of them ladies that he came and tried to bully. So let's see. That's just a couple of newspaper. I think I've already told you those stories. So Burkett Ivins was one of our sheriffs. He was sheriff in the early teens. He was long involved in politics. I think he was court clerk for many years. Lived in Etowah. He was a deputy U.S. Marshal. He was a revenue agent on top of being a sheriff. But he was a force to be reckoned with. We know at least 8 people that he killed. And I will forever appreciate his campaign slogan, "Without violence," as he's running for sheriff. But I have a little bit of personal connection with him, and I'm sure some other people in the room do too. My grandfather, Burkett Moss, worked on the railroad and knew him and was drinking with him the day that he winds up shooting somebody that ultimately led to his demise. But Burkett acquired some wealth and prestige, and he was able to buy a large tract of land on the flats up there. And that's one of those trails it's a horseback trail today, or you can walk back in there. But he had a house back there, and that's a picture of it. Not when he lived there. There was a Lanky or Laney family living there. That came out of a magazine about the Laneys killing somebody, and the sheriff had to go up there and arrest them in the 1960s. But Burkett would periodically go up the mountain, and I'm told had some pretty good times up there with his friends and girlfriends. And they called that, there's a little path up the mountain, they literally called the Burkett Ivins Trace. He had it was a little farm up there. There was a barn and a house and some other buildings. My dad could remember riding horses back in there, and the barn was still there in the 70s. You remember that, Tommy? Yeah. And then somebody burned it, I think, eventually. But Burkett, long after he was sheriff, he was an older guy living in Etowah. He was drinking one day at the Hole in the Wall bar there on Tennessee Avenue with my grandfather. And Charles Dunn, who the Dunn family and Ivins knew each other and had been in politics together, but such it was with Burkett. Dunn was younger than he. And what's funny is my great-grandmother, the wife of my grandfather who was drinking with Burkett, worked at a store on the lower end of Etowah, and she saw Dunn ride in on his motorcycle that morning. And so Dunn rides up to the bar, has a few drinks, and supposedly had some words with Burkett, depending on who you talk to, depends on what they said. And so Burkett leaves. He leaves my grandfather there, and supposedly goes to his house or just goes back behind, I guess that would be on Ohio Avenue. And there was a wood yard back there then. And so as Dunn leaves, he walks around that way, and if you believe everything that was told, he confronted Burkett and picked up a rock. And I don't know if Burkett already had the gun out or not, but nevertheless, that was Burkett's defense, that Dunn had picked up a rock, and Burkett was in fear of his life, and so he shoots Charles Dunn and kills him. That was in 46 or early 47. It's 46. So there is a trial. It ends in a mistrial. Burkett is still set to go back to trial, but one morning he goes out to get in his car. There's a whole story behind all this too, but I know we're pressed for time. Starts his car with his grandson actually in the car with him, and there's a bomb in the car, blows up. He lives. This is how tough the guy was. He was kind of an elderly guy at that time, blew both his legs off, and he lived all day. I mean, he was that tough of a character. But that's an actual picture of the car after he was killed. But he had a connection up there at Starr Mountain. And still, some of those trails still bears his name. So that's just looking at the mountain from Tisdale Cemetery, close to Burkett Ivins' grave. That's just some stories about the mountain, about the hotel, and some of the people that lived up there. And I just about got done in an hour. So that's my presentation. Anybody got any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Why is it called Starr?
For Caleb Starr.
Did he then own a lot of it, or did he?
So, not necessarily. He mostly owned the valley. The mountain really wasn't any good to the people back then, except for wood to burn and to build homes with. The slopes of the mountain are really too steep to farm. Most of what we can tell, it was just Starr's Mountain because it lived at the foot of it. And it was just associated with that name. And it's been called a lot of things. It's been called Chilhowie Mountain, Starr Mountain. But that's the name that we tend to apply to. Anybody else?
So you said that the hotel had 115 rooms. So with something that big, where did staff live?
So there were buildings, and in this little book, a little Starr Mountain book I just made, there is a receipt in there where somebody references giving up their property or selling some of their interest in the Starr Mountain, and talks about the home and the house that's near the hotel. And so, like I said, there were families that lived up in there, and so there were other buildings. Even in one of those photographs, I don't know if you saw it, but you could see another building that sat right there close to the hotel. So people just lived up there, which obviously people would walk down the mountain to go to school, so they probably walk back and forth up and down the mountain to go to work every day. If you're going to walk up and down it to go to school, you walk up and down to go to work. But there were a lot of people that lived.
Is it true that the mobsters came to Whitecliff?
So the hotel was not in operation by the 1930s. Now, I guess it depends on your definition of a mobster. I've never seen that. I mean, it's gone by 1935, 36. And that was kind of when a lot of those things, your Al Capones, they did come down, up and down through Tennessee. And they might have went up there. It was a hunting lodge at one time. I don't know, there was no records necessarily who stayed there then. I guess it's possible, but I've just never seen that. Yes, ma'am.
Did he keep the Alabama wife after he killed his father?
He actually did. She was obviously a very faithful wife. Even though he killed her daddy.
She took those words to the heart about
She took till death do we part, and she was probably a little bit afraid to leave. But she, as far as I know, she was still living when he was killed. Yeah.
Do we know anything about the development of the hotel? Like who went up there and started development on it?
Just Joseph Peck, and there's some records that mention Joseph Peck and some other local businessmen. There's some names kind of pop up. That's the one that always stands out in my mind.
It's Peck.
Yeah, and then, but again, that was the first hotel. The big one is definitely J. Harvey McGill, because hotels were his business.
Got it.
And so that's who built the big one that we see most of the picture. I don't know that a picture exists of the original hotel.
I wouldn't imagine, yeah.
Are there any pictures of inside of the hotel?
There may be, well, technically, yes, I know for sure. If you have ever seen old pictures, old black and white, kind of sepia tone pictures in your family, look at those, because a lot of those say on White Cliff Springs, because there was a photo gallery up there. And that was a very kind of a rare thing. If people just didn't have cameras back then, if you wanted a picture made, you either went to town and went to the photo gallery to have it made, or some of us have these old pictures of our families in front of their house, and then there were traveling photographers that went around and taking pictures of people. But there evidently was a photo gallery up there too at some point, because they stamped it. And what's crazy is if you see pictures of people in a white wicker chair, that seems to be, a lot of those pictures were taken up there. So it doesn't show the inside necessarily of the hotel, but they were taken up there. If there's any that exist, I've never seen them.
My granddaughter took all his children.
Which one was that?
This way.
Oh, is that right? On the Presswoods? Okay. Yeah, a lot of us have pictures. Luckily, and I appreciate my cousins that keep their pictures and share with the rest of us. But yeah, you look at those old pictures, because some of them are actually stamped White Cliff or Starr Mountain. Any other questions? Yeah.
Did that Burkett, did he die before or after the battle happened?
It was after.
After.
Just within a year or so after. Yeah. Yeah. Yes,
Do
ma'am.
you know from how far away some people travel to come to White?
So, it seemed like the Goshes came all the way from maybe Savannah, Georgia, and then there was a judge on the Texas Supreme Court that had standing reservations every year. We know those two at least. So yeah, people would travel, the wealthier people would travel a long way just to get to go up there. But now, you know, in Blount County, there was, I think, Chilhowie Springs. There was a hotel up there. So this was not an uncommon thing throughout the Southeast. This was just the one that was in our county. Nor is it the only spring on the mountain that people bottle water out of. There was the old Gentry Spring. It's been known by 2 or 3 different names. There's some advertising for it that you can still find, where they would sell that healthy water out of the mountains.
And was the hotel open seasonally or was it year-round?
It seems like it sounds like it's open year-round, but most people seem to come during the summer for warmer months. I seen anything going somewhere? Yes, ma'am.
That Stevens Church you talk about, now is that the Stevens Church? I may be in the wrong county that you turn off in the Etowah and go towards Tellico, and it's on that road?
It's on the hill up there, yeah.
Okay.
It's the Becca Community /
So is Starr Mountain near there?
Starr Mountain's right behind it.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. I was over in that area through the olive.
Yeah.
And the graveyard the grave that's covered over there. I always am interested in that.
Yeah. Anything else? Well, thank you all for showing up. And,